This time on Cryptids, I take a deep dive into the state of Louisiana, looking into its present-day reports of cryptids, what types of cryptids and where, and then I'm going to compare that with the ancient history of the earliest hominids, animals, mound sites, looking to see what types of crystals and gems can be found in cryptic Louisiana. Hi, I'm Jenna Bosiger, and if you also have an interest in cryptids from prehistory to the present day, then please hit the like for this video, make sure you're subscribed, and leave a comment if you know about any of Louisiana's mysteries or special locations. So starting with the cryptids, and there are a lot because Louisiana is one of the lushest, most fertile states when it comes to wild plants and habitat for wild animals. And from CountryRoadsMagazine.com, in an article by Alexandra Kennan, who wrote about Bigfoot in Louisiana, writes that for whatever reason, sightings of Louisiana wildmen were common in the 1800s. This would have been when an intelligent species learned how to survive and live on the same planet with humans. There's only one way for them to do it, and that is to keep hidden and remain cryptic and remain as unknown animals, unknown species, cryptids. She mentions the wild woman of Dugdemona and other Sasquatch encounters where the creature is said to have a humanoid face, stand between 6 and 8 feet tall, covered in dark or reddish hair, and smells to high heaven. Bigfoot tracks usually have 5 toes, but researchers claim that the northwest Louisiana and East Texas Bigfoot often have 3 toes with 1 bulbous big toe and 2 smaller ones. And she goes on to say, the historical record of sightings of giant hairy bipedal animals predate the modern era. Okay, there was an incident reported, although within easy range, the hunter decided to capture the wild man rather than shoot him. It was a bad idea. According to the newspaper, the wild man bounded upon him, dragged him from the saddle, and tore him in a dreadful manner, gouging out one of his eyes and biting a large piece out of his shoulder. He then threw the saddle and bridle from the horse and mounted. He set off for the mountains at full speed, guiding the horse with a piece of sapling. And then we've got the Honey Island swamp monster, which, if you've heard about cryptids, you've probably heard about the Honey Island swamp monster. And there's an interesting story behind it. And it says here that in a remote corner of the Honey Island swamp, there can be heard piercing cries, and there's rumors of a creature with the strength to rip out the throat of a boar. And legends of the creature in these parts date back to the Native American lore, but modern sightings began around 1963 when 2 FF air traffic controlmen, local outdoorsmen, set up camp in the interior of the marsh's 70,000 acres. Harlan Ford and friend Billy D. Mills Sr. noticed the potential campsite while flying over a remote area of the swamp outside Slidell, Louisiana. And it was prime hunting territory and in an isolated area that few people had traveled, says Dana Holyfield, who is Harlan Ford's granddaughter. And after he retired, he spent a lot of time at the camp documenting the wildlife and eventually the creatures we call the Honey Island swamp monster. Don't hunt Bigfoot. It is a sin. Then there are the reports of the dogmen, and the dogmen have their own unique name, which is from the Cajun culture in Louisiana, unique to Louisiana, and the name for them is the Rougarou, and that is from the influence, the French influence, that obviously recognized these dogmen as being loup-garous, which is the French word for a human wolf, a wolf man. She said never just invite a loup-garou in, because then once you invite them in, you can't get rid of them, and they have the power over you. And that's a lot of times what is said about things like occult things is, and the Ouija board, it's about inviting the thing in, and really it can't hurt you unless you use that door like a Ouija board and invite them in. But once they're in, very hard to get rid of it. And just to clarify that cryptids, that definition means unknown animal. And humans are animals. Spiders, butterflies, we're all animals. So are hominids. Neanderthals were animals. Humans are animals. All of us, if you're not a plant, you're an animal. If you're alive. And so, I think it is the correct definition to use even when referring to mound builders, because they were likely hominids. Even if they were human, they're still not proven human. They're unknown. And just to get it all, that they're not plants. They're animals. So, I've had some debates. And then we've got the sightings of many, many, many sea serpents and reports of sea serpents. This is a really interesting witness account of a sea serpent like back in the 1800s, 1856. And it says, from brownmarine.com, regional sea stories, close encounter with a creature of the Finny tribe, Louisiana's sea monster, sighting of 1856, which was Louisiana's first recorded sea monster sighting. And it was reported in a news article as follows. A huge fish. Mr. Marshall Ogeron gives us the following description of a monster of the Finny tribe lately killed by him off the mouth of the La Forche in the breakers. Length of the body from point of nose to the tail was 14 feet. Length of tail, 6 feet. Extreme width on the back, 20 feet. Thickness from top of back to the bottom of the belly, 7 feet. Width of the mouth, 3 feet and 6 inches, with horns on either side, 3 feet long. Cavity and brain, 9 by 16 inches. No offense, but really, they made that up. I'm not saying they weren't smart enough to make those numbers up, but that's pretty elaborate hoax with mathematical calculations and anatomical, things going on. And it looks like it was seen by obviously more than one person. And it goes on to say, this huge monster, when killed, I disapprove. He should not have killed it. This huge monster, when killed, was lying with its mouth open, catching small fish on which it is supposed to subsist. It was shot through the head at a distance of about 5 paces and immediately sunk to the bottom. It was then fastened to and then towed to the shore, where it was dissected for the purpose of being converted to oil. But a storm arose, and the captor was forced to abandon the project and fly for safety. Its liver was the size of a rice cask. Whatever that. The exterior of the fish was covered in a skin resembling more that of an elephant than anything to which we can compare it. Mr. Ogeron is a seafaring man and says never before has he seen a fish of this description in our waters. What kind of fish is it? Where did it come from? Finally, the last cryptid worth mentioning that has been repeatedly reported in Louisiana are vampires. And I wouldn't have much to say about it if not for the fact that just since doing my video on Florida, I've started a folder with images of all the Aztec and Mayan gods with fangs. And in that folder, I have, from Spiro Mounds, some mound builder artifacts found in the mounds of these hominids doing things to humans, vampirical things. Not to mention the Calusa mask. Not to mention, I was always not fascinated, but terrified. I used to think about it a lot. I still do. It terrifies me to think of Mayans. That scares me. And then just the thought, okay, sacrificing the best looking, the youngest, the brightest, the best of the best, to offer to a god just the blood and stuff. All about the blood. Why are they obsessed with blood? And now I'm making this vampire connection of this hominid species that they at one time were actually sacrificing human blood and stuff to, and hearts, actually not to an invisible god, but to these actual hominids that drank the blood. And oh my gosh, these artifacts from the Spiro Mounds showing these, like, okay, I'm not going to talk about it right now. But when they say vampires, let's not think of humans, but rather the ones that are reported all around the Gulf Coast back in the day with fangs. Truly not sacrificing people. I thought that was scary, that they were just sacrificing but that they were sacrificing humans to an invisible god. But at one time, I think that they were sacrificing blood of humans to this other hominid species that they refer to as gods, probably because maybe they had some abilities and powers that that humans didn't have. Maybe some humans got to take advantage of that, provided they provide the blood. So something so much going on with that. And that just takes me down another side road. The reports of vampires in the area, in the Gulf Coast, they are not just sprung out of nowhere. They've been going on for a long time, and a lot of people have died as sacrifices, blood sacrifices to this vampirical hominid species. Definitely not human, with fangs. If you want to be on the lookout for vampires, please don't just narrow your alertness to good-looking humans that dress well and have lots of money, because they might be a little bit more realistic and animal-like and like truly another species. Blood-sucking, mosquito, wraith-type hominids that were actually a threat at some time, and maybe still are. I'm always very interested to learn about the first people to inhabit Louisiana. And it says the mound builders. The earliest mound site is Watson. Out of all the mound builder sites in North America, the earliest one is in Louisiana, southern Louisiana, at a place near Watson, Louisiana. And that was around 5,500 years ago. 3,500 BC. And then Poverty Point, which is, we'll get to that, that's in the very northeastern part of the state, looking everywhere for all of the mounds I can find in Louisiana. So when I was looking for the mounds in Louisiana, and in the search I put in not mounds plural, but mound singular. Okay. And stuff's coming up, as you can see. But then I zoom in to the Let's just zoom into this area. What? What is this? They're named mounds, right under the mound builder culture, where we know that they had to deal with a rising sea from the melting ice age. To call a mound named after the mound builders right off the coast of the mound builder culture, and then say it's a submarine plateau, well then, because a mound and a submarine plateau, they're not the same thing. Let's look a little closer. Clearly you can see a line going across the top and another line going across the top. But these lines end with the mound. And they don't extend out past the mound, but rather just centered over the top of this mound. And, you know, I also searched around the Gulf Coast to see if there were any other features named or mounds, but this is the only place that their mounds are named, in this section right off the coast of the mound builders. And looking up closely at these mound sites, so these must also be man-made mounds from the mound builders, and also they must have been made much earlier than any other mound site, at a time when the shoreline would have been all the way out here. And this would have all been land above the sea level. All clustered off the coast of Louisiana. Okay, so I'm looking at the Kailua, the ancient mound builder site and the mound site of the Kailua, which is also all in a big area, Mound Bayou. And I'm looking at all of the man-made features that are now, like, you could take boats in between all these twists and turns, but the ground has been terraformed, made into mounds, and rises above the water. And at first I was like, how the hell did they, get in the water and all the mud, and how did they do that? And then I saw some of our farmland in Louisiana that had been flooded. And I realized, oh, they made these mounds when there was no water. And now it's flooded. And you can see these terraforming, ancient terraforming lines and stuff, man-made, reaching all the way into the Gulf Coast, and then extending off the coast within a complete area of where there must have been a coast, a shoreline, with all these mounds. And obviously these places weren't named mounds probably around the time, everything was being discovered, and the mounds were being named in Louisiana and Mississippi and everywhere. And it's not like it's not like they didn't know what mounds were, who the mound builders were, and that you don't name something a mound off the coast of Louisiana unless it's part of the Mound Builders Society, man-made mounds. So, well, right? And it's all fitting together. And then I find out that, oh yeah, evidence. I look for evidence of a time when when the coast, the shoreline, to see if the shoreline ever receded that far in the history of Louisiana. And turns out when the mound builders were building their mounds during a long period of time, thousands of years here, they had to deal with a rising coastline because of the melting ice age. And actually, reason for the receding and advancing coastline throughout Louisiana's history is because of melting ice ages that come and go. How often do you hear the quote, concentric circles? Atlantis, everybody who knows anything about Atlantis knows about the concentric circles, but also that those concentric circles consisted of waterways and land. Well, Poverty Point and its concentric circles, man-made, and now knowing that there was a time when the water level rose, not only would have filled in those gaps at Poverty Point with water, at some point it receded all the way down to where it is now and even farther. And so then, in theory, at some point, there must have been a time when those raised areas were above water. And so I looked at the measurements of the concentric circles and listened to this stuff. So Poverty Point's centerpiece is a collection of earthworks built during a 600-year period, or what today would be considered 25 generations. Its concentric half circles measuring 4 to 6 feet high in places. So that's how deep the water was, 4 to 6 feet high, with a space of 3/4 of a mile wide. All I'm saying is that I've been talking about Atlantis being in Florida, in the Gulf Coast, the Fertile Crescent. I mean, how much more fertile than Louisiana? From ancientpages.com, in an article called "There Are Hundreds of Ancient Mounds in Coastal Louisiana," in the article called Secrets of Ancient Mound Builders in Louisiana, early in this period, plants and animals, as well as the shoreline, river courses, were quite different than they are today. Subsequently, Paleo-Indian cultures experienced rapid climate change and dramatic sea level rise. I did check Louisiana for gems and found out that the number one fossil in Louisiana is petrified palm, agate, petrified wood, and a special form of opal, and salt domes. And in the salt domes, there are lots of other minerals. So all of these things are related to a landscape that has experienced the Gulf Coast advancing and receding, and even covering it at times, and depending on what stage it is of the melt-off from the last ice age is what determines where that shoreline's going to be. And I do go to Louisiana, which I do want to do, and I do plan on doing. I would be needing to use the local methods of transportation that includes the airboats and the tours that can take you out into the swamps and that are going to be able to get you back and not get lost. Because one of my favorite things in the entire universe of everything is to look at this unbroken forest. It's so exciting, so beautiful, so amazing to me. And I would be camping at the outskirts of all of these places, obviously not being able to penetrate it or get into the interior of these jungle areas, but I wouldn't need to. And I know how important they are for wildlife. And what I started noticing, yeah, these places look green from a distance, and then when you zoom in, you start noticing they're farming the forest. All these lines that they're creating, are they mowing the ground on the forest? They're treating these forests like they're golf courses. And so, yeah, we're doing it in Louisiana, and you may be thinking, oh, but there's still plenty left. Fine, but look at all the farmland. And let's take a look at a place called Suffolk, England. Let's look at their forests. Actually, the European influence is much older there than it is in the United States. And looking at these so-called forests that they have left in Suffolk, Look what they've done. They've mowed them down and made these lines and rows in all their forests. This farming out and mowing down and making the lines into the forest and the unbroken forest is not cool. Louisiana realizes the importance of these vast wilderness areas. And that's going to do it for this episode about Louisiana, which was such an interesting research experience because of all of the different avenues that this research took me on. Okay, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And if you also have an interest in cryptids and in the cryptic states, then please hit the like for this video. Make sure you're subscribed. And until next time, bye!